All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, grab a drink, grab a book, and let's get back where we left off. Welcome back. This is our fourth night reading The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. This is our first foray into Agatha Christie. We've read some other detective drama or mystery before when we were getting into Sherlock Holmes. So this take is refreshing and different. And actually it was fun that last time I think they referenced Sherlock Holmes. So as we were making the same comparisons, so was the author. So were the characters themselves. So a little bit of meta-referential going on. So that's a lot of fun. So looking at this, we are a tiny bit ahead of schedule. We've got 2 nights left, I imagine, tonight and Tuesday. And if we keep at the pace of about 20% a night, we've got a little bit of leeway. So we're not really in too much of a rush tonight or on Tuesday. We'll kind of take our time and enjoy it as it comes. And that's really the best way to approach these. This is one of those novels that was written for enjoyment. None of the pretentious, pompous out there that we've seen in a few other books. Sermonizing like we saw from Paradise Lost. No, whatever the hell Thoreau was. So we can just sit back and enjoy this. Go along for the ride, follow the characters and their trains of thoughts, and see if we can come to the same conclusions that they do. Or whether we can jump the gun and maybe read the mind of Poirot before he has his big reveal. We'll see. I have a feeling that there'll be some sort of twist or turn that none of us will have expected or seen, but was there all along in the text. It's the very best mystery novels, lay everything out for the reader to find if they only have the eyes to see. So, let's find out. Yeah, that's kind of what Thoreau was. A different, somehow more self-important. I'm not sure how you can get more self-important than portraying the word of God in your own way. But, leave it to Thoreau. If ever there's a man to be more self-important than someone who is reinterpreting the Old Testament, it's Thoreau. Sometimes it's best not to ask too many questions. Just admire and bask in the narcissism on display. And that gets us a little too close to current events. So let's not. Yeah, Lucifer came off as less self-obsessed. Absolutely. Alright, let's go ahead and jump back into things and see where we're headed for tonight and what sort of twists and turns this plot will take. What sort of extra motivations we'll find. What sort of despicable, dastardly plots can be unraveled. And so we return now to chapter 17 of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Parker. It occurred to me the next morning that under the exhilaration produced by Tin Ho, or the perfect winning, oh yeah, they were playing Mahjong, I might have been slightly indiscreet. True, Poirot had not asked me to keep the discovery of the ring to myself. On the other hand, he had said nothing about it whilst at Fernley, and as far as I knew, I was the only person aware that it had been found. I felt distinctly guilty. The fact was by now spreading through King's Abbot like wildfire. I was expecting wholesale reproaches from Poirot any minute. I forgot to send out my notices. 1 moment. It is always the way. I get a little bit too anxious to get going. Go, and I think I've got a reskeet coming off, and then we should be all good. And send. Alright, cool. pretending that I'm actually working to grow my channel. Alright. The joint funeral of Mrs. Farrar and Roger Ackroyd was fixed for 11 o'clock. It was a melancholy and impressive ceremony. All the party from Fernley were there. After it was over, Poirot, who had been present, took me by the arm and invited me to accompany him back to the Larches. He was looking very grave, and I feared that my indiscretion of the night before had got round to his ears. But it soon transpired that his thoughts were occupied by something of a totally different nature. "See you," he said, "we must act. With your help, I propose to examine a witness. We will question him. We will put such fear into him that the truth is bound to come out." "What witness are you talking of?" I asked, very much surprised. "Parker," said Poirot. "I asked him to be at my house this morning at 12 o'clock. He should await us there at this very minute." "What do you think?" I ventured, glancing sideways at his face. "I know this, that I am not satisfied." "You think that it was he who blackmailed Mrs. Farrar?" "Either that, or—" "Well," I said, after waiting a minute or two, "my friend, I will say this to you. I hope it was he." The gravity of his manner, and something indefinable that tinged it, reduced me to silence. On arrival at the Larches, we were informed that Parker was already there, awaiting our return. As we entered the room, the butler rose respectively. "Good morning, Parker," said Poirot pleasantly. "One instant, I pray of you." He removed his overcoat and gloves. "Allow me, sir," said Parker, and sprang forward to assist him. He deposited the articles neatly on a chair by the door. Poirot watched him with approval. "Thank you, my good Parker," he said. "Take a seat, will you not? What I have to say may take some time." Parker seated himself with an apologetic bend of the head. "Now, what do you think I asked you to come here for this morning, eh?" Parker coughed. "I understood, sir, that you wished to ask me a few questions about my late master. The private-like." "Precisely," said Poirot, beaming. "Have you made many experiments in blackmail?" "Sir!" The butler sprang to his feet. "Do not excite yourself," said Poirot placidly. "Do not play the farce of the honest injured man. You know all there is to know about the blackmail. Is it not so?" "Sir, I've never been—" "Insulted," suggested Poirot, "in such a way before? Then why, my excellent Parker, were you so anxious to overhear the conversation in Mr. Ackroyd's study the other evening, after you had caught the word blackmail?" "I wasn't. Who was your late master?" rapped out Poirot suddenly. "My late master?" "Yes, the master you were with before you came to Mr. Ackroyd." "A Major Ellerby, sir." Poirot took the words out of his mouth. "Just so. Major Ellerby. Major Ellerby was addicted to drugs, was he not? You travelled about with him. When he was in Bermuda there was some trouble. A man was killed. Major Ellerby was partly responsible. It was hushed up, but you knew about it. How much did Major Ellerby pay you to keep your mouth shut?" Parker was staring at him open-mouthed. The man had gone to pieces. His cheeks shook flabbily. "You see, I have made inquiries," said Poirot pleasantly. "It is as I say. You got a good sum, then, as a blackmailer. And Major Ellerby went on paying you until he died. Now, I want to hear about your latest experiment." Parker still stared. "It is useless to deny. Hercule Poirot knows." "It is so. What I have said about Major Ellerby, is it not?" As though against his will, Parker nodded reluctantly, once. His face was ashen pale. "But I never hurt a hair on Mr. Ackroyd's head," he moaned. "Honest to God, sir, I didn't. I've been afraid of this coming out all this time. I didn't tell you. I didn't. I didn't kill him." His voice rose almost to a scream. "I am inclined to believe you, my friend," said Poirot. "You have not the nerve, the courage, but I must have the truth." "I'll tell you anything, sir, anything you want to know. It's true that I tried to listen that night. A word or two I heard made me curious. And Mr. Ackroyd's wanting not to be disturbed, and shutting himself up with the doctor the way he did. It's God's own truth, what I told the police. I heard the word blackmail, sir, and, well..." He paused. "You thought there might be something in it for you," suggested Poirot smoothly. Well, yes, I did, sir. I thought that if Mr. Ackroyd was being blackmailed, why shouldn't I have a share of the pickings?" A very curious expression passed over Poirot's face. He leaned forward. "Had you any reason to suppose before that night that Mr. Ackroyd was being blackmailed?" "No, indeed, sir. It was such a great surprise to me, such a regular gentleman in all his habits." "How much did you overhear?" "Not very much, sir. There seemed what I might call a spite against me. Of course, I had to attend to my duties in the pantry, and when I did creep along once or twice to the study, it was no use. The first time, Dr. Shepherd came out and almost caught me in the act. And another time, Mr. Raymond passed me in the big hall and went that way. So I knew it was no use, and when I went with the tray, Miss Flora headed me off." Poirot stared for a long time at the man, as if to test his sincerity. Parker returned his gaze earnestly. "I hope you believe me, sir. I've been afraid all along the police would rake up that old business with Major Ellaby and be suspicious of me in consequence." "Bien," said Poirot at last. "I am disposed to believe you. But there is one thing I must request of you, to show me your bank book. You have a bank book, I presume?" "Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I have it with me now." With no sign of confusion, he produced it from his pocket. Poirot took the slim, green-covered book and perused the entries. "Ah, I perceive you have purchased £500 of National Savings Certificates this year." "Yes, sir. I have already over £1,000 saved, the result of my connection with, my late master, Major Ellaby. And I have had quite a little flutter on some horses this year. Very successful. If you remember, sir, a rank outsider won the Jubilee. I was fortunate enough to back it. £20. Poirot handed him back the book. "I will wish you good morning. I believe that you have told me the truth. If you have not, so much the worse for you, my friend." When Parker had departed, Poirot picked up his overcoat once more. "Going out again?" I asked. "Yes, we will pay a little visit to the good Monsieur Hammond." "You believe Parker's story?" "It is credible enough on the face of it. It seems clear that, unless he is a very good actor indeed, he genuinely believes it was Ackroyd himself who was the victim of blackmail. If so, he knows nothing at all about this Mrs. Farrar business." "Then, in that case, who, precisement, who? But our visit to Monsieur Hammond will accomplish one purpose. It will either clear Parker completely, or else, well, I fall into the bad habit of leaving my sentences unfinished this morning," said Poirot apologetically. "You must bear with me." "By the way," I said rather sheepishly, "I've got a confession to make. I'm afraid I have inadvertently let out something about that ring." "What ring?" "The ring you found in the goldfish pond." "Ah, yes," said Poirot, smiling broadly. "I hope you're not annoyed. It was very careless of me." "But not at all, my good friend, not at all. I laid no commands upon you. You were at liberty to speak of it, if you so wished." "She was interested, your sister?" "She was indeed. It created a sensation. All sorts of theories are flying about." "Ah, and yet it is so simple. The true explanation leapt to the eye, did it not?" "Did it?" I said dryly. Poirot laughed.
"The wise man does not commit himself," he observed. "Is not that so? But here we are at Mr. Hammond's."
The lawyer was in his office, and we were ushered in without any delay. He rose and greeted us in his dry, precise manner. Poirot came at once to the point.
"Monsieur, I desire from you certain information, that is, if you'll be so kind as to give it to me. You acted, I understand, for the late Mrs. Farrar of King's Paddock."
I noticed the swift gleam of surprise which showed in the lawyer's eyes, before his professional reserve came down once more like a mask over his face. "Certainly. All her affairs passed through our hands."
"Very good. Now, before I ask you to tell me anything, I should like you to listen to the story Dr. Shepherd will relate to you. You have no objection, have you, my friend, to repeating the conversation you had with Mr. Ackroyd last Friday night?"
"Not in the least," I said, and straightway began the recital of that strange evening. Hammond listened with close attention. "That is all," I said when I had finished. "Blackmail," said the lawyer thoughtfully.
"You are surprised?" asked Poirot.
The lawyer took off his pince-nez and polished them with his handkerchief. "No," he replied, "I can hardly say that I am surprised. I have suspected something of the kind for some time."
"That brings us," said Poirot, "to the information for which I am asking. If anyone can give us an idea of the actual sums paid, you are the man, monsieur."
"I see no object in withholding the information," said Hammond after a moment or two. "During the past year, Mrs. Farrar had sold out certain securities, and the money for them was paid into her account and not reinvested. As her income was a large one, and she lived very quietly after her husband's death, it seems certain that these sums of money were paid away for some special purpose. I once sounded her on the subject, and she said that she was obliged to support several of her husband's poor relations. I let the matter drop, of course. Until now, I have always imagined that the money was paid to some woman who had a claim on Ashley Farrar. I never dreamed that Mrs. Farrar herself was involved."
"And the amount?"
asked Poirot. "In all, I should say the various sums totaled at least £20,000.
£20,000! I exclaimed. "In 1 year?" "Mrs. Farrar was a very wealthy woman," said Poirot dryly, "and the penalty for murder is not a pleasant one."
"Is there anything else I can tell you?" inquired Mr. Hammond.
"I thank you, no," said Poirot, rising. "All my excuses for having deranged you."
"Not at all, not at all." "The word derange," I remarked when we were outside again, "is applicable to mental disorder only."
"Ah!" cried Poirot, "never will my English be quite perfect. A curious language. I should then have said, disarranged? Ne sais pas?"
"Disturbed is the word you had in mind."
"Ah, I thank you, my friend. The word exact. You are zealous for it. Bien. What about our friend Parker? With £20,000 in hand, would he have continued being a butler? Je ne pense pas. It is, of course, possible that he banked the money under another name, but I am disposed to believe he spoke the truth to us. If he is a scoundrel, he is a scoundrel on a mean scale. He has not the big ideas. That leaves us a possibility. Raymond, or, well, Major Blunt."
"Surely not Raymond," I objected, "since we know that he was desperately hard up for a matter of £500.
"That is what he says, yes."
"And as to Hector Blunt—"
"I will tell you something as to the good Major Blunt," interrupted Poirot. "It is my business to make inquiries. I make them. What legacy of which he speaks, I have discovered that the amount of it was close upon £20,000. What do you think of that?" I was so taken aback that I could hardly speak. It's impossible," I said at last. "A well-known man like Hector Blunt." Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "Who knows? At least, he is a man with big ideas. I confess I hardly see him as a blackmailer, but there is another possibility that you have not even considered. What is that? The fire, my friend. Ackroyd himself may have destroyed that letter, blue envelope and all, after you left him.
I hardly think that likely, I said slowly. And yet, of course, it may be so. He might have changed his mind. We had just arrived at my house, and on the spur of the moment, I invited Poirot to come in and take potluck. I thought Caroline would be pleased with me, but it is hard to satisfy one's womenfolk. It appears that we were eating chops for lunch, the kitchen staff being regaled on tripe and onions, and 2 chops sat before 3 people are productive of embarrassment. But Caroline is seldom daunted for long. With magnificent mendacity, she explained to Poirot that although James laughed at her for doing so, she adhered strictly to a vegetarian diet. She descanted ecstatically on the delights of nut cutlets, which I am quite sure she has never tasted, and ate a Welsh rarebit with gusto and frequent cutting remarks as to the dangers of flesh foods. Afterwards, when we were sitting in front of the fire and smoking, Caroline attacked Poirot directly. "Not found Ralph Paton yet?" she asked. "Where should I find him, mademoiselle?" "I thought perhaps you'd found him in Cranchester," said Caroline, with intense meaning in her tone. Poirot looked merely bewildered. "In Cranchester? But why in Cranchester?" I enlightened him with a touch of malice. "One of our ample staff of private detectives happened to see you in a car on the Cranchester Road yesterday," I explained. Poirot's bewilderment vanished. He laughed heartily. That. Just a simple visit to the dentist. Sias tooth. My tooth. It aches. I go there. My tooth. It is at once better. I think to return quickly. The dentist, he says, no, better to have it out. I argue. He insists. He has his way. That particular tooth, it will never ache again." Caroline collapsed, rather like a pricked balloon. We fell to discussing Ralph Paton. "A weak nature," I insisted, "but not a vicious one." "Ah," said Poirot, "but weakness, where does it end?" "Exactly," said Caroline. "Take James there, weak as water, if I weren't about to look after him. "My dear Caroline," I said irritably, "can't you talk without dragging in personalities?" "You are weak, James," said Caroline, quite unmoved. "I'm 8 years older than you are. Oh, don't mind Monsieur Poirot knowing that." I should never have guessed it, mademoiselle," said Poirot, with a gallant little bow. 8 years older, but I've always considered it my duty to look after you. With a bad bringing up, heaven knows what mischief you might have got into by now." "I might have married a beautiful adventuress," I murmured, gazing at the ceiling and blowing smoke rings. "Adventuress!" said Caroline with a snort. "If we're talking of adventuresses—" She left the sentence unfinished. "Well," I said, with some curiosity. "Nothing, but I can think of someone not 100 miles away." She turned to Poirot suddenly. "James sticks to it that you believe someone in the house committed the murder. All I can say is, you're wrong." "I should not like to be wrong," said Poirot. "It is not, how do you say, my métier." "I've got the facts pretty clearly," continued Caroline, taking no notice of Poirot's remark, "from James and others. As far as I can see, of the people in the house, only 2 could have had the chance of doing it. Ralph Paton and Flora Ackroyd." My dear Caroline, now, James, don't interrupt me. I know what I'm talking about. Parker met her outside the door, didn't he? He didn't hear her uncle saying goodnight to her. She could have killed him then and there. Caroline, I'm not saying she did, James. I'm saying she could have done. As a matter of fact, though Flora is like all these young girls nowadays, with no veneration for their betters, and thinking they know best on every subject under the sun,
I don't for a minute believe she'd ever kill a chicken. But there it is. Mr. Raymond and Major Blunt have alibis. Mrs. Ackroyd's got an alibi. Even that Russell woman seems to have one. And a good job for her it is, she has. Who is left? Only Ralph and Flora. And say what you will, I don't believe Ralph Baton is a murderer. A boy we've known all our lives.
Poirot was silent for a minute, watching the curling smoke rise from his cigarette. When at last he spoke, it was in a gentle, far-away voice that produced a curious impression. It was totally unlike his usual manner.
Let us take a man. A very ordinary man. A man with no idea of murder in his heart. There is in him somewhere a strain of weakness deep down. It has never so far never been called into play. Perhaps it never will. And if so, he will go to his grave honored and respected by everyone. But let us suppose that something occurs. He is in difficulties, or perhaps not that even. He may stumble by accident on a secret. A secret involving life or death to someone. And his first impulse will be to speak out, to do his duty as an honest citizen. And then the strain of weakness tells. Here is a chance of money, a great deal of money. He wants money, he desires it, and it is so easy. He has to do nothing for it. Just keep silence. This is the beginning. The desire for money grows. He must have more and more. He is intoxicated by the gold mine which has opened at his feet. He becomes greedy, and in his greed he overreaches himself. One can press a man as far as one likes, but with a woman one must not press too far, for a woman has at heart a great desire to speak the truth. How many husbands who have deceived their wives go comfortably to their graves carrying their secret with them? How many wives who have deceived their husbands wreck their lives by throwing the fact in those same husbands' teeth? They have been pressed too far in a reckless moment, which they will afterwards regret, bien entendu. They fling safety to the winds and turn at bay, proclaiming the truth with great momentary satisfaction to themselves. So it was, I think, in this case. The strain was too great. And so there came your proverb, the death of the goose that laid the golden eggs. But that is not the end. Exposure faced the man of whom we are speaking. And he is not the same man he was, say, a year ago. His moral fiber is blunted. He is desperate. He is fighting a losing battle. He is prepared to take any means that come to his hand. For exposure means ruin to him. And so, the dagger strikes.
He was silent for a moment. It was as though he had laid a spell upon the room. I cannot try to describe the impression his words produced. There was something in the merciless analysis and the ruthless power of vision which struck fear into both of us. Afterwards, he went on softly, the danger removed, he will be himself again, normal, kindly. But if the need again arises, then once more he will strike. Carolyn roused herself at last.
You are speaking of Ralph Baton, she said. You may be right, you may not, but you have no business to condemn a man unheard.
The telephone bell rang sharply. I went out into the hall and took off the receiver. What? I said. Yes, Dr. Shepherd speaking. I listened for a minute or two, then replied briefly, replacing the receiver. I went back into the drawing room. "Poirot," I said, "they have detained a man at Liverpool. His name is Charles Kent, and he is believed to be the stranger who visited Fernley that night. They want me to go to Liverpool at once and identify him." That brings us to the end of chapter 17. So Poirot's little monologue there is kind of telling. So much depends to whom of whom he is speaking, whether it be Ralph or Major Blunt or any of them, really. But there is sort of speaking to human nature there. There's a lot of truisms and universalisms that are let out there, where, you push a man far enough and see what happens. People can change under stresses or temptations. And then what happens after is entirely up to the person. Alright, let's see whether this Charles Kent that is caught up in Liverpool is in fact the person that the doctor saw that night. Whether there's something else going on. So we continue now with chapter 18. Charles Kent. Half an hour later, saw Poirot, myself, and Inspector Raglan in the train on the way to Liverpool. The inspector was clearly very excited. "We may get a line on the blackmailing part of the business, if on nothing else," he declared jubilantly. "He's a rough customer, this fellow, by what I heard over the phone. Takes dope, too. We ought to find it easy to get what we want out of him. If there was the shadow of a motive, nothing's more likely than that he killed Mr. Ackroyd. But in that case, why is young Paton keeping out of the way? The whole thing's a muddle, that's what it is. By the way, Monsieur Poirot, you were quite right about those fingerprints. They were Mr. Ackroyd's own. I had rather the same idea myself, but I dismissed it as hardly feasible." I smiled to myself. Inspector Raglan was so very plainly saving his face. "As regards this man," said Poirot, "he is not yet arrested, eh?" "No, detained under suspicion." "And what account does he give of himself?" "Precious little," said the inspector with a grin. "He's a wary bird, I gather. A lot of abuse, but very little more." On arrival at Liverpool, I was surprised to find that Poirot was welcomed with acclamation. Superintendent Hayes, who met us, had worked with Poirot over some case long ago, and had evidently an exaggerated opinion of his powers. "Now we've got Monsieur Poirot, there shan't be long," he said cheerfully. "I thought you'd retired, monsieur." "So I had, my good Hayes, so I had. But how tedious is retirement! You cannot imagine to yourself the monotony with which day comes after day." "Very likely. So you come to look at at our own particular find? Is this Dr. Shepherd? Think you'll be able to identify him, sir?" "I'm not very sure," I said doubtfully. "How did you get hold of him?" inquired Poirot. "Description was circulated, as you know, in the press and privately. Not much to go on, I admit. This fellow has an American accent, all right, and he doesn't deny that he was near King's Abbot that night. Just asks what the hell it is to do with us, and what he'll see us in before he answers any questions." "Is it permitted that I too see him?" asked Poirot. The superintendent closed one eye knowingly. "Very glad to have you, sir. You've got permission to do anything you please. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard was asking after you the other day. Said he'd heard you were connected unofficially with this case. Where's Captain Paton hiding, sir? Can you tell me that?" "I doubt if it would be wise at the present juncture," said Poirot primly, and I bit my lips to prevent a smile. The little man really did it very well. After some further parley, we were taken to interview the prisoner. He was a young fellow. I should say not more than 22 or 3. Tall, thin, with slightly shaking hands, and the evidences of considerable physical strength somewhat run to seed. His hair was dark, but his eyes were blue and shifty. Seldom meeting him glance squarely. I had all along cherished the illusion that there was something familiar about the figure I had met that night, but if this were indeed he, I was completely mistaken. He did not remind me in the least of anyone I knew. "Now then, Kent," said the superintendent, "stand up. Here are some visitors to see you. Recognize any of them?" Kent glared at us sullenly, but did not reply. I saw his glance waver over the 3 of us, and come back to rest on me. "Well, sir," said the superintendent to me, "what do you say?" "The height's the same," I said, "and as far as general appearance go, it might well be the man in question. Beyond that, I couldn't go." "What the hell's the meaning of all this?" asked Kent. "What have you got against me? Come on, out with it. What am I supposed to have done?" I nodded my head. "It's the man," I said. "I recognize the voice." "Recognize my voice, do you? Where do you think you heard it before?" "On Friday evening last, outside the gates of Fernley Park. You asked me the way there." "I did I?" "Do you admit it?" asked the inspector. "I don't admit anything. Not till I know what you've got on me." "Have you not read the papers in the last few days?" asked Poirot, speaking for the first time. The man's eyes narrowed. "So that's it, is it? I saw an old gentleman croaked at Fernley. Trying to make out I did the job, are you?" "You were there that night," said Poirot quietly. "How do you know, mister?" "By this." Poirot took something from his pocket and held it out. It was the goose quill we had found in the summer house. At the sight of it, the man's face changed. He half held out his hand. "No," said Poirot thoughtfully. "No, my friend, it is empty. It lay where you dropped it, in the summer house that night." Charles Kent looked at him uncertainly. "You seem to know a hell of a lot about everything, you little foreign cockduck. Perhaps you remember this. The papers say that the old gent was croaked between 10:15 and 10 o'clock. "That is so," agreed Poirot. "Yes, but is it really so? That's what I'm getting at." "This gentleman will tell you," said Poirot. He indicated Inspector Raglan. The latter hesitated, glanced at Superintendent Hayes, then at Poirot, and finally, as though receiving sanction, he said, "That's right. Between 10:15 and 10 o'clock. "Then you've got nothing to keep me here for," said Kent. "I was away from Fernley Park about 25 minutes past 9. You can ask at the Dog and Whistle. That's a saloon about a mile out of Fernley on the road to Cranchester. I kicked up a bit of a row there, I remember. As near as nothing to 10:15 it was. How about that?" Inspector Raglan wrote down something in his notebook. "Well?" demanded Kent. "Inquiries will be made," said the inspector. "If you've spoken the truth, you won't have anything to complain about. What were you doing at Fernley Park anyway?" "Went there to meet someone." "Who? That's none of your business." "You'd better keep a civil tongue in your head, my man," the superintendent warned him. "To hell with a civil tongue. I went there on my own business, and that's all there is to it. If I was clear away from before the murder was done, that's all that concerns the cops." "Your name is Charles Kent," said Poirot. "Where were you born?" The man stared at him, then he grinned. "I'm a full-blown Britisher, all right," he said. "Yes," said Poirot meditatively. "I think you are. I fancy you were born in Kent." The man stares. "Why's that? Because of my name? What's that got to do with it? Is the man whose name Kent bound to be born in that particular county?" "Under certain circumstances, I can't imagine he might be," said Poirot very deliberately. "Under certain circumstances, you comprehend." There was so much meaning in his voice as to surprise the 2 police officers.
As for Charles Kent, he flushed a brick red, and for a moment, I thought he was going to spring at Poirot. He thought better of it, however, and turned away with a kind of laugh. Poirot nodded as though satisfied, and made his way out through the door. He was joined presently by the two officers. "We'll verify that statement," remarked Raglan. "I don't think he's lying, though. But he's got to come clear with a statement as to what he was doing at Fernley. It looks to me as though we've got our blackmailer all right. On the other hand, granted his story is correct, he couldn't have had anything to do with the actual murder. He got £10 on him when he was arrested, rather a large sum. I fancy that £40 went to him. The numbers of the notes didn't correspond, but of course he'd have changed them first thing. Mr. Ackroyd must have given him the money, and he made off with it as fast as possible. What was that about Kent being his birthplace? What's that got to do with it?" "Nothing whatever," said Poirot mildly. "A little idea of mine, that was all. I am famous for my little ideas." "Are you really?" said Raglan, studying him with a puzzled expression. The superintendent went into a roar of laughter. "Many's the time I've heard Inspector Japp say that, Monsieur Poirot and his little ideas. Too fanciful for me, he'd say, but always something in them." "You mock yourself at me," said Poirot, smiling, "but never mind. The old ones, they laugh last sometimes, when the young, clever ones do not laugh at all." And nodding his head at them in a sage manner, he walked out into the street. He and I lunched together at an hotel. I know now that the whole thing lay clearly unraveled before him. He had got the last thread he needed to lead him to the truth. But at the time, I had no suspicion of the fact. I overestimated his general self-confidence, and I took it for granted that the things which puzzled me must be equally puzzling to him. My chief puzzle was that the man Charles Kent could have been doing at Fernley. Again and again I put the question to myself, and could get no satisfactory reply. At last I ventured a tentative query to Poirot. His reply was immediate. "Mon ami, I do not think." "No." "Really?" I said incredulously. "Yes, indeed. I suppose now that, to you, it would not make sense if I said that he went to Fernley that night because he was born in Kent." I stared at him. "It certainly doesn't seem to make sense to me," I said dryly. "Ah," said Poirot pityingly. "Well, no matter. I still have my little idea." And that brings us to the end of chapter 18. So we did identify that Charles Kent was the man in the overcoat and the low-pulled hat that night. And he was the one who left the goose quill that you may remember was used to hold heroin. So Poirot's onto something here. And I think at this point, it's probably likely that Kent was there to either buy or sell a little bit of dope. And it's just a matter of coincidence. And it may be that Ursula Bourne was the contact back there, the selling things under the table, or buying them, as the case may be. And you do remember that the head maid, or the head housekeeper, was asking of the doctor whether there was any sort of recourse for someone who was addicted. So there may be some connection there. She seemed so intent as to how to keep things loose. So there's a lot of options going around. The waters continue to muddy as the mixture stirs. All right, let's get one more chapter in before we take a break for the evening. And so, chapter 19, Laura Ackroyd. As I was returning from the round the following morning, I was hailed by Inspector Raglan. I pulled up, and the inspector mounted on the step. Good morning, Dr. Shepard, he said. Well, that alibi is all right enough. Charles Kent's. The barmaid at the Dog and Whistle, Sally Jones, she remembers him perfectly. Picked out his photograph from among five others. It was just 9:45 when he came into the bar, and the Dog and Whistle is well over a mile from Fernley Park. The girl mentions that he had a lot of money on him. She saw him take out a handful of notes from his pocket. Rather surprised her, it did, seeing the class of fellow he was with a pair of boots clean dropping off him. That's where that 40 pounds went right enough. The man still refuses to give an account of his visit to Fernley. Obstinate as a mule he is. I had a chat with Hayes at Liverpool over the wire this morning. Hercule Poirot says he knows the reason the man went there that night, I observed. Does he? Cried the inspector eagerly. Yes, I said maliciously. He says he went there because he was born in Kent. I felt a distinct pleasure in passing on my own discomfiture. Raglan stared at me for a moment or two, uncomprehendingly. Then a grin overspread his weaselly countenance, and he tapped his forehead significantly. Bit gone there, he said. I've thought so for some time. Poor old chap. So that's why he had to give up and come down here. In the family, very likely. He's got a nephew who's quite off his crumpet. Poirot has? I said, very surprised. Yes. Hasn't he ever mentioned it to you? Quite docile, I believe, and all that. But mad as a hatter. Poor lad. Who told you that? Again, a grin showed itself on Inspector Raglan's face. Your sister, Miss Shepherd. She told me all about it. Really, Caroline is amazing. She never rests until she knows the last details of somebody's family secrets. Unfortunately, I have never been able to instill into her the decency of keeping them to herself. Jump in, Inspector, I said, opening the door of the car. We'll go up to the Larches together and acquaint our Belgian friend with the latest news. Might as well, I suppose. After all, even if he is a bit balmy, it was a useful tip he gave me about those fingerprints. He's got a bee in his bonnet about the man Kent, but who knows? There may be something useful behind it. Poirot received us with his usual smiling courtesy. He listened to the information we had brought him, nodding his head now and then. He seems quite okay, doesn't it? Said the inspector rather gloomily. A chap can't be murdering someone in one place when he's drinking in the bar in another place a mile away. Are you going to release him? Don't see what else we can do. We can't very well hold him for obtaining money on false pretenses. Can't prove a ruddy thing. The inspector tossed a match into the grate in a disgruntled fashion. Poirot retrieved it and put it neatly in a little receptacle designed for the purpose. His action was purely mechanical. I could see that his thoughts were on something very different. If I were you, he said at last, I should not release the man Charles Kent yet. What do you mean? Raglan stared at him. What I say, I should not release him yet. You don't think he could have anything to do with the murder, do you? I think probably not. But one cannot be certain yet. But haven't I just told you? Poirot raised a hand protestingly. Ma oui, I heard. I am not deaf, nor stupid, thank the good God. But see you approach the matter from the wrong premises. Is not that the word? The inspector stared at him heavily. I don't know how you make that out. Look here, we know Mr. Ackroyd was alive at 9:45. You admit that, don't you? Poirot looked at him for a moment, then shook his head with a quick smile. I admit nothing that is not proved. Well, we've got proof enough for that. We've got Miss Flora Ackroyd's evidence. That said, she said good night to her uncle. But me, I do not always believe what the young lady tells me. No, not even when she is charming and beautiful. But hang it all, man, Parker saw her coming out of the door. No. Poirot's voice rang out with a sudden sharpness. That is what he did not see. I satisfied myself with that by a little experiment the other day. You remember, Doctor? Parker saw her outside the door, with her hand on the handle. He did not see her come out of the room. But where else could she have been? Perhaps on the stairs. The stairs. Yes, that is my little idea, yes. But those stairs lead only to Mr. Ackroyd's bedroom. Precisely. And still the inspector stared. You think she'd been up to her uncle's bedroom? Well, why not? Why should she lie about it? Ah, that is just the question. It depends on what she was doing there, does it not? You mean the money? Hang it all, you don't suggest that it was Miss Ackroyd who took that £40? I suggest nothing, said Poirot, but I will remind you of this. Life was not very easy for that mother and daughter. There were bills. There was constant trouble over small sums of money. Roger Ackroyd was a peculiar man over money matters. The girl might be at her wit's end for a comparatively small sum. Figure to yourself then what happens. She has taken the money. She descends the little staircase. When she is halfway down, she hears the chink of glass from the hall. She has not a doubt of what it is. Parker coming to the study. At all costs, she must not be found on the stairs. Parker will not forget it. He will think it odd. If the money is missed, Parker is sure to remember having seen her come down those stairs. She has just time to rush down to the study door, with her hand on the handle to show that she has just come out, when Parker appears in the doorway. She says the first thing that comes into her head, a repetition of Roger Ackroyd's orders earlier in the evening, and then goes upstairs to her own room. Yes, but later, persisted the inspector, she must have realized that the vital importance of speaking the truth. Why, the whole case hinges on it. Afterwards, said Poirot dryly, it was a little difficult for Mademoiselle Flora. She is told simply that the police are here and that there has been a robbery. Naturally, she jumps to the conclusion that the theft of the money has been discovered. Her one idea is to stick to her story. When she learns that her uncle is dead, she is panic-stricken. Young women do not faint nowadays, monsieur, without considerable provocation. Eh bien, there it is. She is bound to stick to her story, or else confess everything. And a young, pretty girl does not like to admit that she is a thief, especially before those who esteem she is anxious to retain. Raglan brought down his fist with a thump on the table. I'll not believe it, he said. It's not credible. And you've known this all along. The possibility has been in my mind from the first, admitted Poirot. I was always convinced that Mademoiselle Flora was hiding something from us. To satisfy myself, I made a little experiment I told you of. Dr. Shepherd accompanied me. A test for Parker, you said it was, I remarked bitterly. Mon ami, said Poirot apologetically, as I told you at the time, one must say something. The inspector rose. There's only one thing for it, he declared. We must tackle the young lady right away. She'll come up to Fernley with me. You'll come up to Fernley with me, Monsieur Poirot. Certainly. Dr. Shepherd will drive us up in his car. I acquiesced willingly. On inquiry for Miss Ackroyd, we were shown into the billiard room. Flora and Major Hector Blunt were sitting on the long window seat. Good morning, Miss Ackroyd, said the inspector. Can we have a word or two alone with you? Blunt got up at once and moved to the door. What is it? asked Flora nervously. Don't go, Major Blunt. He can stay, can't he? She asked, turning to the inspector. That's as you like, said the inspector dryly. There's a question or two it's my duty to put to you, miss, but I'd prefer to do so privately, and I dare say you'd prefer it also. Flora looked keenly at him. I saw her face grow whiter. Then she turned and spoke to Blunt. I want you to stay, please. Yes, I mean it. Whatever the inspector has to say to me, I'd rather you heard it. Raglan shrugged his shoulders. Well, if you will have it so, that's all there is to it. Now, Miss Ackroyd, Monsieur Poirot here has made a certain suggestion to me. He suggests that you weren't in the study at all last Friday night. that you never saw Mr. Ackroyd to say goodnight to him, that instead of being in the study, you were on the stairs leading down from your uncle's bedroom when you heard Parker coming across the hall. Flora's gaze shifted to Poirot. He nodded back to her. Mademoiselle, the other day, when we sat round the table, I implored you to be frank with me. What one does not tell to Papa Poirot, he finds out. It was that, was it not? See, I will make it easy for you. You took the money, did you not? The money, said Blunt sharply. There was a silence that lasted for a minute, at least. Then Flora drew herself up and spoke. Monsieur Poirot is right. I took that money. I stole. I am a thief. Yes, a common, vulgar little thief. Now you know. I am glad it has come out. It's been a nightmare these last few days. She sat down suddenly and buried her face in her hands. She spoke huskily through her fingers. You don't know what my life has been since I came here. Wanting things, scheming for them, lying, cheating, running up bills, promising to pay. Oh, I hate myself when I think of it all. That's what brought us together, Ralph and I. We were both weak. I understood him, and I was sorry, because I'm the same underneath. We're not strong enough to stand alone, either of us. We're weak, miserable, despicable things. She looked at Blunt and suddenly stamped her foot. Why do you look at me like that? As though you couldn't believe me. I may be a thief, but at any rate, I'm real now. I'm not lying any more. I'm not pretending to be the kind of girl you like, young and innocent and simple. I don't care if you never want to see me again. I hate myself. I despise myself. But you've got to believe one thing. If speaking the truth would have made things better for Ralph, I would have spoken out. But I've seen all along that it wouldn't be better for Ralph. It makes the case against him blacker than ever. I was not doing him any harm by sticking to my lie. Ralph, said Blunt. I see. Always Ralph. You don't understand, said Flora hopelessly. You never will. She turned to the inspector. I admit everything. I was at my wit's end for money. I never saw my uncle that evening after he left the dinner table. As to the money, you can take what steps you please. Nothing could be worse than it is now. Suddenly she broke down again, hid her face in her hands, and rushed from the room. Well, said the inspector in a flat tone, so that's that. He seemed rather at a loss what to do next. Blunt came forward again. Inspector Raglan, he said quietly, that money was given to me by Mr. Ackroyd for a special purpose. Miss Ackroyd never touched it. When she says she did, she is lying with the idea of shielding Captain Patton. The truth is, as I said, and I am prepared to go into the witness box and swear to it. He made a kind of jerky bow, then, turning abruptly, he left the room. Poirot was after him in a flash. He caught the other up in the hall. Monsieur, a moment, I beg of you, if you will be so good. Well, sir? Blunt was obviously impatient. He stood frowning down on Poirot. It is, this, said Poirot rapidly. I am not deceived by your little fantasy. No, indeed, it was truly Miss Flora who took the money. All the same, it is well imagined what you say. It pleases me. It is very good what you have done there. You are a man quick to think and to act. I'm not in the least anxious for your opinion, thank you, said Blunt coldly. He made once more as though to pass on, but Poirot, not at all offended, laid a detaining hand on his arm. Ah, but you are to listen to me. I have more to say. The other day I spoke of concealments. Very well. All along I have seen what you are concealing. Mademoiselle Flora, you love her with all your heart. From the first moment you saw her, is it not so? Oh, let us not mind saying these things. Why must one in England think it necessary to mention love as though it were some disgraceful secret? You love Mademoiselle Flora. You seek to conceal that fact from all the world. That is very good. That is as it should be. But take the advice of Hercule Poirot. Do not conceal it from Mademoiselle herself.
Blunt had shown several signs of restlessness whilst Poirot was speaking, but the closing words seemed to rivet his attention. "What do you mean by that?" he said sharply.
You think that she loves the Captain Ralph Paton, but I, Hercule Poirot, tell you that she is not so. Mademoiselle Flora accepted Captain Paton to please her uncle, and because she saw in the marriage a way of escape from her life here, which was becoming, frankly, insupportable to her. She liked him, and there was much sympathy and understanding between them, but love? No. It is not Captain Paton Mademoiselle Flora loves.
"What the devil do you mean?" asked Blunt. I saw the dark flush under his tan.
You have been blind, monsieur, blind! She is loyal, the little one. Ralph Paton is under a cloud. She is bound in honor to stick by him.
I felt it was time I put in a word here to help on the good work. "My sister told me the other night," I said encouragingly, "that Flora had never cared a penny piece for Ralph Paton, and never would. My sister is always right about these things." Blunt ignored my well-meant efforts. He spoke to Poirot. "Do you really think—" he began and stopped. He is one of those inarticulate men who find it hard to put things into words. Poirot knows no such disability.
If you doubt me, ask her yourself, monsieur. But perhaps you no longer care to... the affair of the money."
Blunt gave a sound like an angry laugh. "You think I'd hold that against her? Roger was always a queer chap about money. She got in a mess she didn't dare tell him. Poor kid. Poor lonely kid." Poirot looked thoughtfully at the side door.
Mademoiselle Flora went into the garden, I think," he murmured.
"I've been every kind of a fool," said Blunt abruptly. "Rum conversation we've been having, like one of those Danish plays. But you're a sound fellow, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you." He took Poirot's hand and gave it a grip which caused the other to wince in anguish. Then he strode to the side door and passed out into the garden.
"Not every kind of a fool,"
murmured Poirot, tenderly nursing the injured member.
"Only one kind. The fool in love."
And that brings us to the end of chapter 19. And it is out. I think most of us had caught on that Blunt was carrying a torch for Flora. Not necessarily that she was returning it, but I had a feeling there too. So that's out in the open. Now for everyone, even the most dense of narrators, to see. And so we'll have to see ourselves what will be coming next. Whether Blunt was moved by his own sort of protective vices to act precipitously against Roger, his old friend, to make things easier for his, as far as he knew, unrequited love? Or will this just rule the two of them out? There is the matter of the money, but at that point, it's accounted for. So there's other things going on, but maybe that was all a red herring, just to sort of set the stage to increase the window of time and nullify a couple alibis. Because as we know now, if no one had gone in to see Roger after the doctor left, that has an alibi at least, that leaves quite a bit more time available for a nefarious purpose. And there were some separations. So we'll see soon what dastardly deeds were done in that little time between when the doctor left and when Roger was discovered. Because now that Flora is not there to provide that the doctor was, or that her uncle was still alive at that point, there is so much more opportunity for malfeasance. All right, let's go ahead and take a few minutes now, top up our drinks, stretch our legs, and we'll be back in just a little while to get through a few more chapters tonight. I'd like to probably stop with about 15% left or so we've got a good bit left for Tuesday. So we've got probably about, 1 or 2 chapters yet tonight. So and I think, if I'm judging things right, we'll probably end on a cliffhanger tonight before any big conclusions are reached. And that leaves Tuesday for the Day of Destiny. And that's how I'd like it. So, be back in just a few minutes, and we will continue when we return.
All right, we are back. Unfortunately, this is the end of my box of cab. I'd say pour one out, but I have none left to pour. That just means a trip to the grocery is still needed. All right. So, we've had some twists and turns, some revelations of romantic intent, and Flora has come out as a mostly petty thief. She's been rather strapped for cash and pinching a little bit from her uncle's wallet, which, while detestable, is not exactly grand theft, nor is it murder. So, we'll have to see how this change of circumstances changes how everyone reacts to the case and how things are seen, because this invalidates several alibis. And so, things that were once set on rock-solid bedrock are left unstable. And so many more opportunities are left on the table. So let's get through another chapter or so tonight, maybe two, depending on how long they are and how long they take us and how much we have left over. And see where we go next. With Chapter 20, Miss Russell. Inspector Raglan had received a bad jolt. He was not deceived by Blunt's valiant lie any more than we had been. Our way back to the village was punctuated by his complaints. "This alters everything, this does. I don't know whether you've realized it, Monsieur Poirot." "I think so, yes, I think so," said Poirot. "You see, I have been familiar with the idea for some time." Inspector Raglan, who had only had the idea presented to him a short half-hour ago, looked at Poirot unhappily, and went on with his discoveries. "Those alibis, now. Worthless, absolutely worthless. Got to start again. Find out what everyone was doing from 9:30 onwards. 9:30! That's the time we've got to hang on to. You were quite right about the man Kent. We don't release him yet a while. Let me see now. 9:45 at the Dog and Whistle. He might have got there in a quarter of an hour if he ran. It's just possible that it was his voice Mr. Raymond heard talking to Mr. Ackroyd, asking for money, which Mr. Ackroyd refused. But one thing's clear. It wasn't he who sent the telephone message. The station is half a mile in the other direction. Over a mile and a half from the Dog and Whistle, and he was at the Dog and Whistle until about 10 minutes past 10. Dang, that telephone call. We always come up against it." "Oh, we do indeed," agreed Poirot. "It is curious." "It's just possible that if Captain Patron climbed into his uncle's room and found him there murdered, he may have sent it. Got the wind up, thought he'd be accursed, and cleared out. It's possible, isn't it?" "Why should he have telephoned?" "May have had doubts if the old man was really dead. Thought he'd get the doctor up there as soon as possible, but didn't want to give himself away. Yes, I say now, how's that for a theory? Something that, I should say." The inspector swelled his chest out importantly. He was so plainly delighted with himself that any words of ours would have been superfluous. We arrived back at my house at this minute, and I hurried into my surgery patients, who had all been waiting a considerable time, leaving Poirot to walk to the police station with the inspector. Subtle reminder that the doctor actually is still trying to work through all of this. Having dismissed the last patient, I strolled into the little room at the back of the house, which I call my workshop. I am rather proud of the homemade wireless set I turned out. Caroline hates my workroom. I keep my tools there, and Annie is not allowed to wreak havoc with a dustpan and brush. I was just adjusting the interior of an alarm clock, which had been denounced as wholly unreliable by the household, when the door opened and Caroline put her head in. "Oh, there you are, James," she said, with deep disapproval. "Monsieur Poirot wants to see you." "Well," I said rather irritably, for her sudden entrance had startled me, and I had let go of a piece of delicate mechanism. If he wants to see me, he can come in here. In here, said Caroline. That's what I said, in here. Caroline gave a sniff of disapproval and retired. She returned in a moment or two, ushering in Poirot, and then retired again, shutting the door with a bang. Aha, my friend, said Poirot, coming forward and rubbing his hands. You have not got rid of me so easily, you see. Finished with the inspector? I asked. For the moment, yes. And you? You have seen all of the patients? Yes. Poirot sat down and looked at me, tilting his egg-shaped head on one side, with the air of one who savors a very delicious joke. You are in error, he said at last. You still have one patient to see. Not you, I exclaimed in surprise. Ah, not me, bien entendu. Me, I have the health magnificent. No. To tell you the truth, it is a little complot of mine. There is someone I wish to see, you understand, and at the same time, it is not necessary that the whole village should intrigue itself about the matter. Which is what would happen if the lady were seen to come to my house, for it is a lady. But to you, she has already come as a patient before. Miss Russell, I exclaimed. Precisely. I wish much to speak to her, so I send her the little note and make the appointment in your surgery. You are not annoyed with me? On the contrary, I said. That is, presuming I am allowed to be present at the interview. But naturally, in your own surgery. You know, I said, throwing down the pincers I was holding, it's extraordinarily intriguing, the whole thing. Every new development that arises is like the shake you give to a kaleidoscope. The thing changes entirely in aspect. Now, why are you so anxious to see Miss Russell? Poirot raised his eyebrows. Surely it is obvious, he murmured. There you go again, I grumbled. According to you, everything is obvious. But you leave me walking about in a fog. Poirot shook his head genially at me. You mock yourself at me. Take the matter of Mademoiselle Flora. The inspector was surprised, but you were not. I never dreamed of her being the thief, I expostulated. Perhaps no. But I was watching your face, and you were not, like Inspector Raglan, startled and incredulous. I thought for a minute or two. Perhaps you were right, I said at last. All along I felt that Flora was keeping something back. So the truth, when it came, was subconsciously expected. It upset Inspector Raglan very much indeed. Poor man. Ah, porca oui. The poor man must rearrange all his ideas. I profited by his state of mental chaos to induce him to grant me a little favor. What was that? Poirot took a sheet of notepaper from his pocket. Some words were written on it, and he read them aloud. The police have, for some days, been seeking for Captain Ralph Baton, the nephew of Mr. Ackroyd of Fernley Park, whose death occurred under such tragic circumstances last Friday. Captain Baton has been found at Liverpool, where he was on the point of embarking for America. He folded up the piece of paper again. That, my friend, will be in the newspapers tomorrow morning. I stared at him, dumbfounded. But it isn't true. He's not at Liverpool. Poirot beamed on me. You have the intelligence so quick. No, he has not been found at Liverpool. Inspector Raglan was very loath to send me this paragraph to the press, especially as I could not take him into my confidence. But I assured him most solemnly that very interesting results would follow its appearance in print, so he gave in, after stipulating that he was on no account to bear the responsibility. I stared at Poirot. He smiled back at me. It beats me, I said at last, what you expect to get out of that. You should employ your little grey cells, said Poirot gravely. There he goes again. Jeez, oh Pete. He rose and came across the bench. It is that You really have the love of the machinery, he said, after inspecting the debris of my labors. Every man has his hobby. I immediately drew Poirot's attention to my homemade wireless, finding him sympathetic. I showed him one or two little inventions of my own, trifling things, but useful in the house. Decidedly, said Poirot. You should be an inventor by trade, not a doctor. But I hear the bell. That is your patient. Let us go into the surgery. Once before, I had been struck by the remnants of beauty in the housekeeper's face. This morning I was struck anew. Very simply dressed in black, tall, upright, and independent as ever, with her big dark eyes and an unwonted flush of color in her usually pale cheeks. I realized that, as a girl, she must have been startlingly handsome. Good morning, mademoiselle, said Poirot. Will you be seated? Dr. Shepherd is so kind as to permit me the use of his surgery for a little conversation I am anxious to have with you. Miss Russell sat down with her usual composure. If she felt any inward agitation, it did not display itself in any outward manifestation. It seems a queer way of doing things, if you'll allow me to say so, she remarked. Miss Russell, I have news to give you. Indeed. Charles Kent has been arrested at Liverpool. Not a muscle of her face moved. She merely opened her eyes a trifle wider and asked with a tinge of defiance, Well, what of it? But at that moment it came to me, the resemblance that had haunted me all along. Something familiar in the defiance of Charles Kent's manner. The two voices, one rough and coarse, the other painfully ladylike, were strangely the same in timbre. It was of Miss Russell that I had been reminded that night outside the gates of Fernley Park. I looked at Poirot, full of my discovery, and he gave me an imperceptible nod. In answer to Miss Russell's question, he threw out his hands in a thoroughly French gesture. I thought you might be interested. That is all, he said mildly. Well, I'm not particularly, said Miss Russell. Who is this Charles Kent, anyway? He is a man, mademoiselle, who was at Fernley on the night of the murder. Really, fortunately for him, he has an alibi. At 10:15, he was at the public house a mile from here. Lucky for him, commented Miss Russell. But we still do not know what he was doing at Fernley. Who it was he went to meet, for instance. I'm afraid I can't help you at all, said the housekeeper politely. Nothing came to my ears. If that is all, she made a tentative movement as though to rise. Poirot stopped her. It is not quite all, he said smoothly. This morning, fresh developments have arisen. It seems now that Mr. Ackroyd was murdered. Not at 10:15, but before. Between 9:10, when Dr. Shepherd left, and 10:15. I saw the color drain from the housekeeper's face, leaving it dead white. She leaned forward, her figure swaying. But Miss Ackroyd said... Miss Ackroyd has admitted that she was lying. She was never in the study at all that evening. Then it would seem that in this Charles Kent we have the man we are looking for. He came to Fernley, can give no account of what he was doing there. I can tell you what he was doing there. He never touched a hair of old Ackroyd's head. He never went near the study. He didn't do it, I tell you. She was leaning forward. That iron self-control was broken through at last. Terror and desperation were in her face. Monsieur Poirot, you don't believe me. Poirot got up and came to her. He patted her reassuringly on the shoulder. But yes, I will believe. I had to make you speak, you know. For an instant, suspicion flared up in her. Is what you said true? That Charles Kent is suspected of the crime? Yes, that is true. You alone can save him by telling the reason for his being at Fernley. He came to see me. She spoke in a low, hurried voice. I went out to meet him. In the summer house, yes, I know. How do you know? Mademoiselle, it is the business of Hercule Poirot to know things. I know that you went out earlier in the evening, that you left a message in the summer house to say what time you would be there. Yes, I did. I had heard from him, saying he was coming. I dared not let him come to the house. I wrote to the address he gave me and said I would meet him in the summer house, and described it to him so that he would be able to find it. Then I was afraid he might not wait there patiently, and I ran out and left a piece of paper to say I would be there about 10 minutes past 9. I didn't want the servants to see me, so I slipped out through the drawing room window. As I came back, I met Dr. Shepherd, and I fancied that he would think it queer. I was out of breath, for I had been running. I had no idea he was expected to dinner that night. She paused. Go on, said Poirot. You went out to meet him at 10 minutes past 9. What did you say to each other? It's difficult, you see. Mademoiselle, said Poirot, interrupting her, in this matter I must have the whole truth. What you tell us need never go beyond these 4 walls. Dr. Shepherd will be discreet, and so shall I. See, I will help you. This Charles Kent, he is your son, is he not? She nodded. The color had flamed into her cheeks. No one has ever known. It was long ago, down in Kent. I was not married. So you took the name of the county as a surname for him, I understand. I got work. I managed to pay for his board and lodging. I never told him that I was his mother, but he turned out badly. He drank, then took to drugs. I managed to pay his passage out to Canada. I didn't hear of him for a year or 2. Then, somehow or other, he found out that I was his mother. He wrote me asking for money. Finally, I heard from him back in this country again. He was coming to see me at Fernley, he said. I dared not let him come to the house. I have always been considered so very respectable. If anyone got an inkling, it would have been all up with my post as housekeeper. So I wrote to him in the way I have just told you. And in the morning you came to see Dr. Shepherd. Yes. I wondered if something could be done. He was not a bad boy before he took to drugs. I see, said Poirot. Now, let us go on with the story. He came that night to the summer house. Yes, he was waiting for me when I got there. He was very rough and abusive. I had brought with me all the money I had, and I gave to him. He walked a little, and then he went away. What time was that? It must have been between 20 and 25 minutes past 9. It was not yet half past when I got back to the house. Which way did he go? Straight out the same way he came, by the path that joined the drive, just inside the lodge gates. Poirot nodded. And you? What did you do? I went back to the house. Major Blunt was walking up and down the terrace smoking, so I made a detour to get round to the side door. It was just then, on 9:30, as I tell you. Poirot nodded again. He made a note or two in a microscopic pocketbook. I think that is all, he said thoughtfully. Ought I, she hesitated, ought I to tell this to Inspector Raglan? It may come to that, but let us not be in a hurry. Let us proceed slowly, with due order and method. Charles Kent is not yet formally charged with murder. Circumstances may arise which will render your story unnecessary. Miss Russell rose. Thank you very much, Monsieur Poirot, she said. You have been very kind. Very kind indeed. You do believe me, don't you? That Charles had nothing to do with this wicked murder? There seems no doubt that the man who was talking to Mr. Ackroyd in the library at 9:30 could not possibly have been your son. be of good courage, mademoiselle. All will yet be well. Miss Russell departed. Poirot and I were left alone together. So that's that, I said. Every time we come back to Ralph Baton. How did you manage to spot Miss Russell as the person Charles Kent came to meet? Did you notice the resemblance? I had connected her with the unknown man long before we actually came face to face with him. As soon as we found that quill, the quill suspected dope, and I remembered your account of Miss Russell's visit to you. Then I found the article on cocaine in that morning's paper. It all seemed very clear. She had heard from someone that morning, someone addicted to drugs. She read the article in the paper, and she came to ask a few tentative questions. She mentioned cocaine, since the article in question was on cocaine. Then, when you seemed too interested, she switched hurriedly to the subject of detective stories and untraceable poisons. I suspected a son or a brother, or some other undesirable male relation. Ah, but I must go. It is the time of the lunch. Stay and lunch with us, I suggested. Poirot shook his head. A faint twinkle came into his eyes. Not again today. I should not like to force Mademoiselle Caroline to adopt a vegetarian diet 2 days in succession. It occurred to me that there was not much which escaped Hercule Poirot. And that brings us to the end of chapter 20. So, I didn't expect it to be a son. I thought it was a brother or a boyfriend or something. I knew Miss Russell had the connection to Kent. I mean, that was pretty obvious right from the get-go with the coming in to ask for the recovering of an addict. So that was kind of out there. That feels like a lot of a red herring there, and such was all to lead the eye away from other more obvious choices. So that sort of leaves Miss Russell out of things and precludes Kent from the running of things. And Miss Ackroyd is out of the running of things. But Blunt, the old friend, was on the terrace. And the assistant, or the secretary, was around. His alibi no longer holds water. And let's see who else is still around. The other housekeepers are not accounted for right now. And Mrs. Ackroyd is unaccounted for, as far as I know. Actually, I'm not sure what she's been doing at all. And she's been pushing rather heavily that something else was up. The absence of anything news from her is rather suspicious, actually. Alright, we've got about enough time and space left in the book to get one more chapter in tonight, and that'll leave us with about 15% or so left, which is just what we want for the last day. So, let's go ahead and get through one more chapter tonight, and we'll see whether things are any more clear or muddied even more. I'm not sure whether the trend for this is to make things to be absolutely tangled and confused right up until the final conclusion, or whether we'll start to be able to suss things out. We'll see. So, chapter 21, the paragraph in the paper. Caroline, of course, had not failed to see Miss Russell come to the surgery door. I had anticipated this, and had ready an elaborate account of the lady's bad knee. But Caroline was not in a cross-questioning mood. Her point of view was that she knew what Miss Russell had really come for, and that I didn't. "Pumping you, James," said Caroline. "Pumping you in the most shameless manner, I've no doubt. It's no good interrupting. I dare say you hadn't the least idea what she was... I dare say you hadn't the least idea she was doing it even. Men are so simple. She knows that you are in Monsieur Poirot's confidence, and she wants to find out things. Do you know what I think, James? I couldn't begin to imagine. You think so many extraordinary things. It's no good being sarcastic. Well, I'll be. She actually caught on to the sarcasm for once. I think Miss Russell knows more about Mr. Ackroyd's death than she is prepared to admit. Caroline leaned back triumphantly in her chair.
Do you really think so? I said absently.
You are very dull today, James. No animation about you. It's that liver of yours.
Our conversation then dealt with purely personal matters.
The paragraph inspired by Poirot duly appeared in our paper the next morning. I was in the dark as to its purpose, but its effect on Caroline was immense. She began by stating most untruly that she had said as much all along. I raised my eyebrows, but did not argue. Caroline, however, must have felt a prick of conscience, for she went on, I mayn't have actually mentioned Liverpool, but I knew he'd try to get away to America. That's what Crippen did. Without much success, I reminded her. Poor boy. And so they've caught him. I consider, James, that it's your duty to see that he isn't hung. What do you expect me to do? Why, you're a medical man, aren't you? You've known him from the boy upwards, not mentally responsible. That's the line to take, clearly. I read only the other day that they're very happy in Broadmoor. It's quite like a high-class club.
But Caroline's words had reminded me of something. I never knew that Poirot had an imbecile nephew, I said curiously.
Didn't you? Oh, he told me all about it. Poor lad. It's a great grief to all the family. They've kept him at home so far, but it's getting to such a pitch that they're afraid he'll have to go into some kind of institution.
I suppose you know pretty well everything there is to know about Poirot's family by this time, I said, exasperated.
Pretty well, said Caroline complacently. It's a great relief to people to be able to tell all their troubles to someone.
It might be, I said, if they were ever allowed to do so spontaneously. Whether they enjoy having confidences screwed out of them by force is another matter.
Caroline merely looked at me with the air of a Christian martyr enjoying martyrdom.
That's an image.
You are so self-contained, James, she said. You hate speaking out, or parting with any information yourself, and you think everybody else must be just like you. I should hope that I never screw confidences out of anybody. For instance, if Monsieur Poirot comes in this afternoon, as he said he might do, I shall not dream of asking him who it was arrived at his house early this morning.
Early this morning? I queried.
Very early, said Caroline. Before the milk came. I just happened to be looking out of the window. The blind was flapping. It was a man. He came in a closed car, and he was all muffled up. I couldn't get a glimpse of his face, but I will tell you my idea, and you'll see that I'm right.
What's your idea?
Caroline dropped her voice mysteriously. A home office expert, she breathed.
A home office expert, I said amazed.
My dear Caroline! Mark my words, James. You'll see that I'm right. That Russell woman was here that morning after your poisons. Roger Ackroyd might easily have been poisoned in his food that night. I laughed out loud. Nonsense, I cried. He was stabbed in the neck. You know that as well as I do. After death, James, said Caroline, to make a false clue.
My good woman, I said.
I examined the body, and I know what I'm talking about. That wound wasn't inflicted after death. It was the cause of death. You need make no mistake about it. Caroline merely continued to look omniscient, which so annoyed me that I went on. Perhaps you will tell me, Caroline, if I have a medical degree or I have not. You have the medical degree, I dare say, James. At least, I know you have, but you've no imagination whatever. Having endowed you with a treble portion, there was none left over for me, I said dryly. I was amused to notice Caroline's maneuvers that afternoon when Poirot duly arrived. My sister, without asking a direct question, skirted the subject of the mysterious guest in every way imaginable. By the twinkle in Poirot's eye, I saw that he realized her object. He remained blandly impervious, and blocked her bowling so successfully that she herself was at a loss how to proceed. Having, I suspect, quietly enjoyed the little game, he rose to his feet and suggested a walk. "It is that I need to reduce the figure a little," he explained. "You will come with me, Doctor? And perhaps later Miss Caroline will give us some tea." "Delighted," said Caroline. "Won't your, guest come in also?" "You are too kind," said Poirot. "But no, my guest reposes himself. Soon you must make his acquaintance." "Quite an old friend of yours, so somebody told me," said Caroline, making one last valiant effort. "Did they?" murmured Poirot. "Well, we must start." Our tramp took us in the direction of Fernley. I had guessed beforehand that it might do so. I was beginning to understand Poirot's methods. Every little irrelevancy had a bearing upon the whole. "I have a commission for you, my friend," he said at last. "Tonight, at my house, I desire to have a little conference. You will attend, will you not?" "Certainly," I said. "Good. I need also all those in the house. That is to say, Mrs. Ackroyd, Mademoiselle Flora, Major Blunt, Monsieur Raymond. I want you to be my ambassador. This little reunion is fixed for 9 o'clock. You will ask them, yes?" "With pleasure. But why not ask them yourself?" "Because then they will put the questions. Why? What for? They will demand what my idea is, and as you know, my friend, I much dislike to have to explain my little ideas until the time comes." I smiled a little. "My friend Hastings, he of whom I told you, used to say of me that I was the human oyster. But he was unjust. Of facts, I keep nothing to myself, but to everyone his own interpretation of them." "When do you want me to do this?" "Now, if you will. We are close to the house." "Aren't you coming in?" "No, me. I will promenade myself in the grounds. I will rejoin you by the lodge gates in a quarter of an hour's time." I nodded and set off on my task. The only member of the family at home proved to be Mrs. Ackroyd, who was sipping an early cup of tea. She received me very graciously. "So grateful of you, Doctor," she murmured, "for clearing up that little matter with Monsieur Poirot. But life is one trouble after another. You have heard about Flora, of course?" "What exactly?" "This new engagement. Flora and Hector Blunt. Of course, not such a good match as Ralph would have been, but after all, happiness comes first. What dear Flora needs is an older man, someone steady and reliable, and then Hector is really a very distinguished man in his way. You saw the news of Ralph's arrest in the paper this morning?" "Yes," I said, "I did." "Horrible." Mrs. Ackroyd closed her eyes and shuddered. "Geoffrey Raymond was in such terrible way. Rang up Liverpool, but they wouldn't tell him anything at the police station there. In fact, they said that they hadn't arrested Ralph at all. Mr. Raymond insists that it's all a mistake. What do they call it? A canard of the newspapers? I've forbidden it to be mentioned before the servants. Such a terrible disgrace. Fancy if Flora had actually been married to him." Mrs. Ackroyd shut her eyes in anguish. I began to wonder how soon I should be able to deliver Poirot's invitation. Before I had time to speak, Mrs. Ackroyd was off again. You were here yesterday, weren't you, with that dreadful Inspector Raglan, brute of a man. He terrified Flora into saying she took that money from poor Roger's room. And the matter was so simple, really. The dear child wanted to borrow a few pounds. Didn't like to disturb her uncle, since he'd given strict orders against it. But knowing where he kept his notes, she went there and took what she needed.
Is that Flora's account of the matter? I asked.
My dear doctor, you know what girls are nowadays. So easily acted on by suggestion. You, of course, know all about hypnosis and that sort of thing. The inspector shouts at her and says the word steal over and over again until the poor child gets an inhibition. Or is it a complex? I always mix up those two words. And actually thinks to herself that she has stolen the money. I saw at once how it was, but I can't be too thankful for the whole misunderstanding in one way. It seems to have brought those two together, Hector and Flora, I mean. And I assure you that I have been very much worried about Flora in the past. Why, at one time, I actually thought there was going to be some kind of understanding between her and young Raymond. Just think of it. Mrs. Ackroyd's voice rose in shrill horror. A private secretary with practically no means of his own.
It would have been a severe blow to you, I said. Now, Mrs. Ackroyd, I have got a message for you from Monsieur Hercule Poirot.
For me?
Mrs. Ackroyd looked quite alarmed. I hastened to reassure her, and I explained what Poirot wanted.
Certainly, said Mrs. Ackroyd rather doubtfully. I suppose we must come if Monsieur Poirot says so. But what is it all about? I'd like to know beforehand.
I assured the lady truthfully that I myself did not know any more than she did.
Very well, said Mrs. Ackroyd at last, rather grudgingly. I will tell the others, and we will be there at 9 o'clock.
Thereupon I took my leave, and joined Poirot at the agreed meeting place.
I've been longer than a quarter of an hour, I'm afraid, I remarked. But once that good lady starts talking, it's a matter of the utmost difficulty to get a word in edgewise. It is of no matter, said Poirot. Me, I have been well amused. This park is magnificent.
We set off homewards. When we arrived, to our great surprise, Caroline, who had evidently been watching for us, herself opened the door. She put her fingers to her lips. Her face was full of importance and excitement.
Ursula Bourne, she said, the parlour maid from Fernley. She's here. I put her in the dining room. She's in a terrible way, poor thing. Says she must see Monsieur Poirot at once. I've done all I could, taken her a cup of hot tea. It really goes to one's heart to see anyone in such a state. In the dining room? Asked Poirot.
This way, I said, and flung open the door. Ursula Bourne was sitting by the table. Her arms were spread out in front of her, and she had evidently just lifted her head from where it had been buried. Her eyes were red with weeping. Ursula Bourne, I murmured. But Poirot went past me with outstretched hands.
No, he said. That is not quite right, I think. It is not Ursula Bourne, is it, my child? But Ursula Patton? Mrs. Ralph Patton?
Dun dun dun. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 21 with, as expected, a bit of a doozy of a cliffhanger. And that leaves us at 16% remaining, which after we narrow down the closing bits, probably just about spot on. So, that'll be where we end for tonight. But, wow, that was a bit of a... That dropped a brick on things, didn't it? The, reveal that the maid that was being let go was, in fact, Ralph's secret wife. And so, obviously, when it's in the newspaper that he's been arrested and going to be hanged for the murder of his uncle, or, yeah, stepfather? Stepfather is what it was. Then obviously she's going to be distraught. So, that very likely is going to free up her from the suspicions. We'll have to see how it plays out, but this conversation that we'll be having at the start of chapter 22 on Tuesday is likely going to be very, very important. And so, with that, let's go ahead and wrap up for the evening. We're a little bit early, but we've had a lot of back and forth. I'm enjoying this one a whole lot. Yeah, this isn't the twist that I was expecting. It's not that it's completely unexpected. Something of the sort was going to come up. And she's been just interesting enough of a character that we knew something was up. Especially considering the previous reaction to, or the reaction of her previous employer. So there's something going on there. But how and why and wherefore is the intriguing part of it. And I'm sure Poirot will lead us along the trail of his thoughts, because we're finally getting to the point where the cards are starting to be laid on the table. There's not much left. So the big one, the big part of this will, I think, be the conversation at Poirot's home with the members of the household. That's going to be the important point. So, we'll have to wait until Tuesday to find out. But we will be finishing on Tuesday. Yeah, exactly. It's not entirely out of left field, but still a surprise on how it played out. And if this is the fruition of... Well, it's not even all of the result of that article being put out. Because Raymond was rather up in arms about it as well. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So, let's circle back on Tuesday, when we will continue and conclude the Murder of Roger Ackroyd. As always, I thank you very much for joining us. If you have not yet, I encourage you to drop a like on the stream, maybe a subscription to the channel. Let the algorithm know that we're doing fun things, and don't miss out on any of our live readings, or, if, as the case may be, all of our recordings, because all of our books, all of our readings are present in the VOD on the channel. So you can go back to when I was just starting out, when we started out with the sun, with what was it, The Sun Also Rises, or what was it, Hemingway, or any of the other wonderful books that we've read so far, and we'll you can catch up. I'm told I'm decent background noise. All right, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and until next time, when we will be finishing on Tuesday, the Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Thank you very much, and good night.